Leaders of the world's richest democracies, members of the Group of Seven Rich Nations, G7, have agreed to stiffen sanctions against Russia, while a draft communique to be issued after their talks in the Japanese city of Hiroshima stressed the need to reduce reliance on trade with China. On Ukraine, the G7 leaders said they had ensured that the embattled country had the budget to support Ukraine's needs for this year and early 2024. Today, we are taking new steps to ensure that Russia's illegal aggression against the sovereign state of Ukraine fails, and to support the Ukrainian people in their quest for a just peace rooted in respect for international law, they said in a statement. The United States and the rest of the G7 economies will unveil new sanctions and export controls targeting Russia over its war against Ukraine, a U.S. official said ahead of the summit. Ukraine wants its allies to be bolder in imposing sanctions on Russia, including by targeting banks that provide financial services to serving soldiers, a senior advisor told Reuters. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said his government wanted pragmatic measures to prevent the circumvention of sanctions imposed on Russia. Great Britain published plans to ban imports of Russian diamonds, copper, aluminum, and nickel, and announced a new wave of sanctions against Russia, targeting companies connected to the alleged theft of Ukrainian grain. The draft version of the G7 communique on China said the leaders are prepared to build constructive and stable relations with China while acting in their national interests. U.S. President Joe Biden met Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, and the two discussed ways to strengthen defense cooperation and counter coercive behavior by China, the White House said in a statement. On climate change, the G7 said they must take the lead in phasing out fossil fuels, attempting to build momentum for a global deal this year to gradually quit oil, coal, and gas. The G7 believes that publicly supported investment in the gas sector can be temporarily appropriate, while countries are accelerating the phasing out of their dependency on Russia, a draft communique seen by Reuters showed. The world is now facing multiple crises such as the climate crisis, the pandemic, and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Under these circumstances, the G7, which shares fundamental values, must effectively respond to important issues facing the international community and lead the world. Meanwhile, a group of Japanese activists took to the streets in the western Japanese city of Hiroshima today to protest against the G7 leaders' summit and nuclear war. Flanked by police, some in riot gear, the protesters marched through a main street in central Hiroshima, not far from the Peace Memorial Park, where several G7 summit events were being held. Japan and the United States are trying to conduct a war of aggression on China. I am protesting because I absolutely cannot accept the fact that they are in Hiroshima, a place where an atomic bomb was dropped, trying to hold a meeting to start a nuclear war. U.S. President Joe Biden is in the land of Hiroshima, and he's brought a button along to fire a nuclear missile. I cannot forgive him for this. He needs to apologize to the people in Hiroshima. China is gravely concerned about recent signs of negative China-related moves at the G7 summit and urges Japan not to turn into a political show against or to curb China, the country's embassy in Japan said. European Council President Charles Michel said that the EU would continue to stay firm on human rights in Hong Kong, Xinjiang, and Tibet. The G7 has also called for a world without nuclear weapons, urging Russia, Iran, China, and North Korea to cease nuclear escalation and embrace non-proliferation, another statement released by the White House showed. Russia's nuclear rhetoric and stated intent to deploy nuclear weapons in Belarus are dangerous and unacceptable, and Russia should return to full implementation of the New START treaty, the leaders said in the statement. A French plane is due to take Ukraine's President Zelensky from the Arab League summit in Saudi Arabia to Hiroshima for the G7 meeting. Zelensky is expected to arrive at the summit tomorrow on May 20th. Very important things will be decided there, and it is therefore the presence of our president that is absolutely essential in order to defend our interests. The G7 leaders sat down to a working dinner in Hiroshima as the first day of the leaders' summit drew to a close. The three-day summit in Japan, lasting until Sunday, May 21st, is expected to see leaders debate strategy on China's growing international might and the more than year-long conflict in Ukraine.